On the night the Vance family held their grand homecoming banquet, I, their biological son, was not even allowed to walk through the front door. My biological mother, Victoria, threw a maid's uniform through the iron gate, her face twisted in disgust. Put this on and come through the back door. Keep your head down. Do not let anyone see your face and embarrass our family. Inside the grand ballroom, Christian, the adopted son they had raised for 18 years, stood at the center of attention. He was dressed in a bespoke designer tuxedo, surrounded by my biological parents, looking like the true sole heir to the Vance empire. Seeing me, he immediately walked over with a warm, welcoming smile, calling me his brother. The guests fawned over him, praising how kind and generous he was to the newcomer. But I could hear his inner voice loud and clear. Look at this trailer trash, trying to steal my life. I will kick you back to the gutter where you belong sooner or later. My biological sister, Olivia, also leaned in to hiss a warning. Behave yourself, Ethan. Do not even dream about touching the Vance family fortune. I did not say a word. I just lowered my head and smirked. What they did not know was that I could not just hear people's inner thoughts. I could broadcast them directly to the entire house's smart speaker system. I reached into my pocket, tapped my phone, and gently pressed the broadcast button. In the next second, Christian's malicious, venomous voice echoed through every single speaker in the Vance mansion. The driveway of the Vance estate in Long Island was packed with luxury sports cars. Tonight was the 20th birthday party for the Vance family's adopted son, Christian. Every high society figure in the city had shown up. Meanwhile, I, Ethan Reed, the biological son who had been lost for 20 years, stood awkwardly in the golden-lit foyer wearing a pair of faded jeans and a pilling t-shirt. The crystal chandeliers were blindingly bright, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and sweet champagne. My biological mother, Victoria Vance, was staring at me as if I were a pile of steaming garbage. "What on earth are you wearing?" she whispered harshly, her voice dripping with disgust. "Tonight is Christian's big night. Are you trying to make our family the laughingstock of the elite?" My biological father, Arthur Vance, frowned and impatiently tugged at his tie. "All right, stop wasting your breath on him. Have someone take him to the servants' quarters in the back house. He is not to come out until the party is over." Standing there, the last shred of hope I had for this family shattered into dust. These were the biological parents I had traveled 10 hours to meet. Just then, a young man and a young woman came down the grand spiral staircase. The boy wore a custom tuxedo studded with micro-diamonds, looking like a handsome prince. The girl was in a high-fashion evening gown, looking cold and regal. They were Christian and my so-called older sister, Olivia. Christian saw me, his lips curving into a polite but distant smile. "Is this the brother we finally found?" He stood on the stairs, looking down at me, a flash of contempt crossing his eyes. Victoria immediately pulled him to her side, her voice softening. "Christian, sweetie, you do not need to come down. He is just here to stay for a few days." Olivia, on the other hand, glared at me coldly. "Ethan, right? Let me make this clear. Now that you're back at the Vance estate, you better stay in your lane. Christian is sweet and innocent. If you try any dirty tricks or attempt to steal what belongs to him, I will make your life a living hell." The four of them stood together, a united front, treating me like some evil intruder. I looked at Christian's innocent face. Just as I was about to speak, a sharp, sudden pain shot through my brain. Then a screeching, nasty voice exploded in my mind. "This trailer trash looks so disgusting. He actually thinks he can come back and play the rich young master? In his dreams. Once tonight is over, I will find a random excuse to kick him out of this house forever." My eyes widened as I stared at Christian. His lips had not moved. He was still wearing that polite, saintly smile. Was I hallucinating? No. I focused my mind, locked targeting his face. "What are you staring at, hillbilly? Everything in the Vance family belongs to me. Mom, Dad, Olivia, they're mine. You are just a pathetic stray nobody wants." I took a deep breath. I could hear his thoughts, and I could feel that as long as I willed it, I could transmit this voice to anyone in the room. This was an ability that had awakened after I hit my head in a minor car accident on my way here. I thought it was just tinnitus, but it turned out to be a gift from fate. I looked at my dear sister, who was glaring at me, and a cold smile crept on my face. "Since you love your precious little brother so much, let me show you how sweet his mind really is." I focused my mind on Olivia and tapped the virtual broadcast button in my head. The air seemed to freeze. Olivia, who had been glaring at me coldly, suddenly stiffened. Her pupils dilated in sheer shock. Olivia is such a brainless BTCH. As long as I play the sweet little brother, she barks at whoever I want like a loyal guard dog. What a useful tool. Christian's voice echoed with crystal clear precision inside Olivia's mind. Olivia turned her head slowly, staring at Christian in complete disbelief. "Christian, what did you just say?" Her voice trembled. Christian looked completely bewildered, blinking his innocent eyes. "I did not say anything, Olivia. I was just saying that Ethan must have had a hard life. What is wrong with this crazy BTCH? Why is she looking at me like that? Did she find out that I was the one who broke her boyfriend's designer watch and blamed it on the new chauffeur? The second thought exploded in Olivia's mind. Olivia's face drained of all color. She took a step back, her eyes filled with absolute horror and shock as she looked at Christian. Olivia, what is wrong? Why do you look so pale? Victoria noticed her daughter's distress and asked quickly. Olivia pointed at Christian, her lips trembling, but she could not squeeze out a single word. What could she say? That she heard her brother calling her a brainless dog in her head? Who would believe her? I chose that exact moment to look down, playing the part of the humble, mistreated son. Olivia, is it because I'm standing here? Am I ruining the mood? I will go to the servants' quarters right now. I do not want to ruin Christian's birthday. My quiet, submissive behavior made Christian's secret thoughts sound even more monstrous. Olivia looked at me with a whirlwind of emotions, shock, doubt, and a trace of guilt. No need, Olivia said, taking a deep breath to suppress the chaos in her heart. Her voice was raspy. You are a biological Vance. You're not sleeping in the servants' quarters. Mother, have someone get him a suit. He is joining the party. Olivia, are you crazy? Arthur glared at her. Do you want him to walk out there like a hobo and make us a laughingstock? Old man, you have already lost all your face anyway. Once I get my hands on the family shares, you are the first one I am kicking off the board of directors. This time, I switched the broadcast channel to Arthur. Arthur's shouting stopped instantly. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He whipped his head toward Christian, his eyes bulging. Father? What is wrong? Christian was terrified by the murderous look in Arthur's eyes. He shrank back toward Victoria. Arthur panted heavily, his chest rising and falling violently. He pointed a shaking finger at Christian. It took him a long moment before he spat out through clenched teeth. Fine. Perfect. Get him changed. He is joining the party. Victoria had no idea what was going on, but seeing her husband and daughter acting like they had seen a ghost, she did not dare argue. She reluctantly called a maid to take me upstairs. I followed the maid up the grand spiral staircase. At the landing, I stopped and looked down at the pale father and daughter and the completely confused Christian. The show was just getting started. The maid took me to a guest room at the end of the second floor. There was a suit laid out on the bed, clearly prepared in a hurry. It was a tight-fitting neon green suit made of cheap, shiny fabric. The style was so tacky and outdated that it looked like something a clown would wear to a cheap kid's party. Young Master Ethan, Master Christian personally picked this out for you. He said this color would make you stand out, the maid said, keeping her head low, a hint of pity in her voice. Looking at the eyesore of the suit, I let out a cold laugh. Christian really went all out. If I were the old, insecure Ethan, walking into a room full of billionaires in this clown suit would have broken me. But I was not him anymore. Without hesitation, I put on the neon green suit. If we were going to embarrass ourselves, let us make it a grand disaster for everyone. The moment I pushed open the doors of the grand ballroom, the chatter died down instantly. Every eye in the room locked onto me. Shock, disgust, mockery, amusement. 1,000 different looks converged on me as if I were a circus animal. Victoria's face turned almost as green as my suit. She looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Arthur was shaking with rage, refusing to even look in my direction. Christian, wearing his dazzling custom tuxedo, walked toward me like a proud peacock. Ethan, that is a very unique look, he said loudly, making sure the surrounding guests could hear. Everyone, I want to introduce you to my brother who was lost for so many years, Ethan. The crowd burst into whispers. Is that the real son? Why is he dressed like a clown? Geez, you cannot take the trash out of the gutter. He has none of Christian's elegance. The Vance family must be mortified. If I were Arthur, I would pretend I did not know him. Listening to the whispers, a smug, venomous grin flashed in Christian's eyes. Laugh. Keep laughing, you hillbilly. This is what you get for trying to take my place. I will make sure you can never show your face in this city again. Looking at his fake smile, I patted his shoulder warmly, smiling even brighter than him. Thanks for the compliment, Christian. After all, you picked this suit out for me yourself. You said it matched my personality perfectly. The moment I said that, the mocking whispers paused. Several business rivals of the Vance family in the crowd suddenly looked very amused. Christian's smile froze. Ethan, I just thought the color was vibrant. How dare this loser say that out loud? Just wait. I will destroy you later. I ignored his panic. My eyes swept over the guests who had been laughing at me. There was Mr. Richard Miller, a notorious new money billionaire who was laughing the loudest. And Mr. Harold Cooper, a man who had married into a wealthy family and lived off his wife, looking down his nose at me. I smiled, targeted them, and turned on the group broadcast mode. Richard Miller is laughing so hard. But does he know his wife spent last night at her young boy toy's apartment again? Apparently, the boy toy is threatening to expose everything to the tabloids. And Harold Cooper, the ultimate gold digger, His precious son lost $10 million in underground gambling last month and embezzled company funds to cover the debt. The audit is coming next week, and he is going straight to prison. These were all secrets Christian had gathered. He loved digging up dirt on high society to use as leverage. And now, I was broadcasting all these secrets to the entire room using Christian's own voice. The maid took me to a guest room at the end of the second floor. There was a suit laid out on the bed, clearly prepared in a hurry. It was a tight-fitting, neon green suit made of cheap, shiny fabric. The style was so tacky and outdated that it looked like something a clown would wear to a cheap kid's party. Young Master Ethan, Master Christian personally picked this out for you. He said this color would make you stand out, the maid said, keeping her head low, a hint of pity in her voice. Looking at the eyesore of a suit, I let out a cold laugh. Christian really went all out. If I were the old, insecure Ethan, walking into a room full of billionaires in this clown suit would have broken me. But I was not him anymore. Without hesitation, I put on the neon green suit. If we were going to embarrass ourselves, let us make it a grand disaster for everyone. The moment I pushed open the doors of the grand ballroom, the chatter died down instantly. Every eye in the room locked onto me. Shock, disgust, mockery, amusement. 1,000 different looks converged on me, as if I were a circus animal. Victoria's face turned almost as green as my suit. She looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Arthur was shaking with rage, refusing to even look in my direction. Christian, wearing his dazzling custom tuxedo, walked toward me like a proud peacock. "Ethan, that is a very unique look," he said loudly, making sure the surrounding guests could hear. "Everyone, I want to introduce you to my brother who was lost for so many years, Ethan." The crowd burst into whispers. "Is that the real son? Why is he dressed like a clown? Geez, you cannot take the trash out of the gutter. He has none of Christian's elegance." The Vance family must be mortified. If I were Arthur, I would pretend I did not know him. Listening to the whispers, a smug, venomous grin flashed in Christian's eyes. "Laugh. Keep laughing, you hillbilly. This is what you get for trying to take my place. I will make sure you can never show your face in this city again." Looking at his fake smile, I patted his shoulder warmly, smiling even brighter than him. "Thanks for the compliment, Christian. After all, you picked this suit out for me yourself. You said it matched my personality perfectly." The moment I said that, the mocking whispers paused. Several business rivals of the Vance family in the crowd suddenly looked very amused. Christian's smile froze. "Ethan, I just thought the color was vibrant. How dare this loser say that out loud? Just wait. I will destroy you later." I ignored his panic. My eyes swept over the guests who had been laughing at me. There was Mr. Richard Miller, a notorious new money billionaire who was laughing the loudest. And Mr. Harold Cooper, a man who had married into a wealthy family and lived off his wife, looking down his nose at me. I smiled, targeted them, and turned on the group broadcast mode. Richard Miller is laughing so hard. But does he know his wife spent last night at her young boy toy's apartment again? Apparently, the boy toy is threatening to expose everything to the tabloids. And Harold Cooper, the ultimate gold digger. His precious son lost $10 million in underground gambling last month and embezzled company funds to cover the debt. The audit is coming next week, and he's going straight to prison. These were all secrets Christian had gathered. He loved digging up dirt on high society to use as leverage. And now, I was broadcasting all these secrets to the entire room using Christian's own voice. Richard Miller, who had been chuckling with a glass of high-end scotch in his hand, froze mid-laugh. His face went from a healthy, alcohol-flushed pink to a stark, ugly white. Beside him, Harold Cooper's condescending sneer melted off his face, replaced by a sudden, frantic twitch in his left eye. The psychic broadcast didn't sound like a loud, booming voice from the heavens. It was far more insidious. It was a whisper that bypassed their ears entirely, vibrating directly against their temporal lobes, carrying the unmistakable, smooth, slightly nasal cadence of Christian's voice. To them, it felt like an intrusive, vivid thought, except they all realized, in the exact same fraction of a second, that they were all hearing the exact same thing. Christian's face remained a mask of polite, saintly confusion, but beneath his skin, his pulse was visibly hammering against his collarbone. Why is Miller looking at me like that? Christian's actual, immediate thoughts spiked in panic, and because I kept the transmission open, his panic echoed right along with it. Did that cheap private investigator leak the photos of Miller's wife? No, there's no way. I paid him $50,000 to keep his mouth shut. If Miller finds out I have that drive, he'll pull his logistics investments from the Vance shipping docks. I have to play dumb. I have to pretend I'm the innocent victim. Richard Miller's hand shook so violently that his heavy crystal glass slipped through his fingers. It shattered on the imported marble floor, splatting amber scotch across the hem of a nearby guest designer gown. Nobody even blinked at the mess. "You." Miller's voice was a low, guttural growl that vibrated with years of suppressed rage. He took a heavy step toward Christian. You little parasite. My wife. You've been spying on my family? Christian took a step back, his eyes widening in genuine, terrified bewilderment. He didn't understand how his deepest, most carefully guarded leverage had just been laid bare. Mr. Miller, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been standing right here beside my mother the whole time. I haven't said a word. Don't lie to me. Miller roared, lunging forward and grabbing Christian by the lapels of his custom micro diamond tuxedo. The fabric bunched and groaned under Miller's massive, furious grip. I heard you. I heard your voice in my head, clear as day. You have photos? You're blackmailing us. Richard, please. Victoria Vance rushed forward, her hands fluttering in panic as she tried to pry Miller's thick fingers off her precious adopted son. There must be some misunderstanding. Christian is a gentle boy. He would never do such a thing. It's this trash. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at me, standing there in my tight, neon green clown suit. He must have brought some kind of speaker, some trick. He's trying to ruin my son's birthday. I stood perfectly still, letting my hands hang loosely at my sides. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused my mind on Victoria, locking onto her frantic, desperate attempts to shield Christian, and I dug into Christian's current thoughts about her. Screaming like a hysterical fish, as usual, Christian's inner voice echoed in Victoria's mind, cold, mocking, and entirely devoid of affection. If she didn't have her father's trust fund and those prime real estate shares, she'd be nothing but a high-maintenance, aging parasite. I can't wait until I get her to sign over the power of attorney next month under the guise of estate planning. The moment the ink is dry, I'm putting her in that cheap care home upstate and changing the locks on this house. Victoria froze. Her hand, which had been raised to slap Miller's arm away, slowly dropped to her side. The fierce, maternal protectiveness in her eyes died a sudden, agonizing death, replaced by a hollow, paralyzing horror. She turned her head slowly, looking at Christian as if she were looking at a complete stranger. Christian, she whispered, her voice cracking, barely audible over the rising murmurs of the crowd. What did you just think about me? Mom, I didn't think anything. Christian cried out, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and confusion. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally. Dad, Olivia, help me. Everyone is going crazy. They're accusing me of things I haven't even said. Olivia Vance stood a few feet away, her hands pressed against her mouth. She had already heard Christian call her a brainless dog earlier, but seeing her mother collapse inward under the weight of his mental betrayal seemed to shatter the last of her denial. He really thinks that, Olivia muttered, her voice trembling. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and guilt. He's been lying to us. Every single day. For 18 years. Arthur Vance, meanwhile, was clutching his chest. He wasn't having a heart attack, but the sheer weight of Christian's earlier thought, die already, old man, so I can claim a board seat, had sucked the air right out of his lungs. He looked at the boy he had groomed to inherit his life's work, the boy he had preferred over his own flesh and blood, and saw only a vulture waiting for him to rot. Security, Arthur rasped, his voice barely a shadow of his usual commanding tone. Get him out of my sight. Father. Christian gasped, taking another step back. You can't believe this. It's a setup. It has to be Ethan. He's doing something to us. He turned his venomous glare toward me. In his mind, a torrent of desperate, violent thoughts erupted, and I broadcasted every single one of them to the entire room, like a radio station blasting static and fury. I should have killed this trailer trash 5 years ago. When I first found out he was still alive, Christian's inner voice screamed in everyone's heads. I should have never let that detective just archive the file. I should have paid those thugs in Ohio to run him over and make it look like an accident. Why didn't I just bury him in the dirt where he belongs? Now he's ruined everything. My money, my inheritance, my crown. The ballroom went dead silent again. The guests, billionaires, politicians, socialites, shrank away from Christian as if he were carrying a plague. The revelation wasn't just about blackmail anymore. It was a confession of attempted murder, of systematic, calculated cruelty. Victoria let out a choked, broken sob and sank onto a nearby velvet sofa, covering her face with her hands. Arthur looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. 5 years ago, Arthur whispered, his eyes bulging as he stared at Christian. You knew where Ethan was? You knew he was alive 5 years ago, and you kept it from us? No, Dad, that's not true. I didn't know. Christian screamed, his eyes darting frantically toward the grand double doors of the ballroom. But his mind was a sieve, leaking the truth with every heartbeat. Of course I knew, you senile old bastard, his inner voice sneered, loud and clear to everyone in the room. I paid Henderson Private Investigations $50 grand to falsify the search records and tell you the trail went cold in Oregon. If you had found it back then, you would have split my trust fund. I wasn't about to share a single cent with a filthy gutter rat. You monster, Olivia breathed, tears spilling over her eyelashes. We loved you. We gave you everything. Realizing he had lost them completely, Christian's expression underwent a terrifying transformation. The innocent, boyish charm drained from his face, leaving behind a cold, sharp, and ugly sneer. He stopped trying to play the victim. So what? Christian spat out, his actual voice finally aligning with the malice of his mind. He looked around at the hostile faces of the high society that had adored him only minutes ago. You think you're all so pure? Every single one of you has bodies in your closets. I just knew how to use them. And as for you, he turned his glaring eyes on me, his teeth bared. You think you won, Ethan? You're still nothing but a joke in a green clown suit. You think they'll love you now? Look at them. They're disgusted by you. You don't belong here, and you never will. I looked down at the cheap, shiny polyester of my neon green sleeve, then looked back up at him. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a profound, quiet sense of relief. I know I don't belong here, I said softly, my voice calm and steady. And honestly, Christian, I've never been more glad of anything in my life. Christian let out a harsh, wild laugh, spun on his heel, and bolted out of the ballroom, pushing past a group of stunned guests and running toward the grand spiral staircase. Stop him, Richard Miller yelled, but nobody moved. The shock was too heavy, the betrayal too surreal. I watched him go, but I wasn't done yet. Christian was running to his private suite on the third floor. He was going to pack his passport, his hidden cash, and whatever offshore account details he had secured. In his mind, he was already planning his escape to a non-extradition country. I turned my back on the silent, staring crowd in the ballroom and walked out into the foyer. As I walked, I felt the slight, warm throb behind my temples grow stronger. My power wasn't just limited to direct mental projection. I could feel the invisible web of electronic signals humming through the walls of the Vance mansion. The high-speed fiber optic cables, the smart home servers, the wireless frequencies of the multi-room Bose audio system. If I wanted to make sure Christian's ruin was absolute, I needed to bridge the gap between my mind and their machines. I reached the smart control panel mounted on the wall of the second-floor landing. It was a sleek brushed steel touchscreen that controlled the entire estate's lighting, security, and audio. I placed my palm flat against the cool metal screen. I closed my eyes. A sharp, metallic taste filled my mouth, and for a second, my vision flickered. I felt my consciousness bleed into the digital current. It was like tuning an old radio, turning the dial through static until the signal snapped into crystal clear focus. System connected. Downstairs in the ballroom, the hidden, high-end speakers hummed. Outside in the gardens, where the catering staff and drivers were waiting, the outdoor sound system crackled to life. In the servants' quarters, in the security lodge, in every single bedroom of the massive estate, the smart speakers synchronized. Upstairs, in his locked study, Christian was frantically tearing through his desk drawers. He slammed a heavy leather bag onto the mahogany desk and pulled out his phone, dialing a number with shaking fingers. The call connected. "Marcus!" Christian yelled into the receiver, his voice tight with hysteria. "We need to move the offshore accounts right now. The entire $5 million from the logistics front. Transfer it to the Swiss vault. Now." His physical voice, transmitted through his phone, was picked up by the smart system's microphone in his study, and my mind routed that audio directly into every single speaker in the entire Vance estate. "What do you mean now?" A voice on the other end of the line asked, echoing through the ballroom downstairs, the gardens, and the security gates. "The audit isn't scheduled until next week, Christian. If we move that volume of cash without Arthur's signature, the flags will go off immediately." "I don't care about the flags," Christian screamed, his voice blasting from the hidden ceiling speakers in the grand ballroom, where the guests stood frozen, listening to the live confession of financial fraud. The old man found out. Somehow, they know everything. The Miller blackmail, the Cooper embezzlement cover-up, all of it. I'm leaving the country tonight. Just initiate the transfer, you idiot, or I'm taking you down with me. Fine, I'm on it. But you need to get to the private airfield in New Jersey. I'll have the pilot prepped. I'm leaving in 5 minutes. Just get the money moved." Christian slammed the phone down. Downstairs, the silence was absolute, broken only by the quiet hum of the speakers turning off as I pulled my hand away from the control panel. The guests in the ballroom looked at each other in stunned, horrified silence. Richard Miller was already on his phone, furiously demanding his personal security team block the exit of the Vance estate. Harold Cooper was pale, leaning against a pillar, realizing his son's embezzlement was now public knowledge and a matter of police record. I stood on the landing, looking down at the ruined landscape of high society. Within 10 minutes, the distant, wailing sirens of police cruisers cut through the quiet, prestigious Long Island night. The blue and red lights flashed against the towering iron gates of the Vance estate, reflecting off the polished hoods of the luxury sports cars packed into the driveway. The front doors were pushed open, and a squad of officers, led by 2 detectives, marched into the foyer. Arthur Vance, one of the detectives called out, looking at the pale, broken patriarch who was slowly walking out of the ballroom. "He's upstairs," Arthur said, his voice completely dead, devoid of any strength. He pointed a shaking finger toward the 3rd floor. "In his study. He's trying to flee." The officers didn't waste time. They headed up the stairs, their heavy boots clattering against the marble steps. A few minutes later, Christian was led down the stairs in handcuffs. His hair was disheveled, his custom tuxedo was rumpled, and his face was twisted in a mixture of raw fury and desperation. He looked like a wild animal caught in a trap. As the officers escorted him past the landing, Christian stopped. He locked eyes with me. "You did this," he hissed, his actual voice spitting venom. "You ruined my life. You're nothing but a parasite, Ethan. You took everything from me." I looked at him, my expression blank. I didn't need to use my power to know what he was thinking now. His mind was just a chaotic, screaming void of hatred and fear. "I didn't take anything from you, Christian," I said quietly, the sound of my voice carrying easily in the silent foyer. "You built this house of cards. I just let everyone see the wind." The officers pulled him forward, and he was dragged out into the flashing lights of the police cruisers, his screams of protest fading into the night as the car doors slammed shut. The guests began to filter out, walking past me with their heads down, avoiding my eyes. Nobody was laughing at my neon green suit anymore. Nobody was whispering about trailer trash. They looked at me with a profound, unsettling fear. They didn't know how I had done it, but they knew that somehow I had laid bare the darkest secrets of the city's most powerful family in a single evening. By midnight, the grand mansion was empty. The crystal chandeliers still burned brightly, casting their expensive glow over the empty glasses, the spilled champagne, and the shattered glass on the marble floor. Victoria sat on the velvet sofa, her makeup ruined by tears, her eyes staring blankly at the wall. Arthur stood by the fireplace, his back to the room, staring into the cold, unlit hearth. Olivia sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase, her head resting in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I walked down the stairs, my cheap shoes squeaking against the polished wood. Hearing my footsteps, Victoria blinked and looked up. A sudden, desperate spark of hope flared in her tear-stained face. She stood up, stumbling slightly, and reached out her hands toward me. "Ethan," she sobbed, her voice trembling with a pathetic, desperate longing. "My baby, my real son. Oh God, what have we done? We were so blind. We were so incredibly blind." She reached out, trying to grab my cheap, neon green sleeve, but I took a step back, letting her hands fall into the empty air. "We can make this right," Victoria pleaded, her hands clutching at her chest. "We can hire the best tailors tomorrow. We'll get you the best clothes, the best cars. We'll introduce you to everyone properly. You're a Vance, Ethan. You're the sole heir to everything we own. Please forgive us. We didn't know." Arthur turned around slowly, his face etched with a deep, crushing guilt. "She's right, Ethan. I was wrong about you. I was blinded by what I wanted Christian to be. But you're my blood. We can rebuild this. We can save the company together. I'll make you the vice president by next month. Just stay." Olivia looked up from the stairs, her eyes red and swollen. "Ethan, please, don't leave us. We're your family." I looked at the 3 of them. The powerful, untouchable Vance family, reduced to begging a boy in a clown suit to save them from their own ruin. They didn't want me. They wanted a shield. They wanted to use their biological son to patch up the gaping wound in their reputation, to show the world that they were still a united, moral family. I looked at Victoria's hands, which had thrown a maid's uniform through the iron gate just a few hours ago. I looked at Arthur, who had ordered me to the servants' quarters so I wouldn't embarrass them. And I looked at Olivia, who had threatened to make my life a living hell if I touched their fortune. Family. I repeated the word, tasting it. It felt cold, heavy, and entirely meaningless. "I traveled 10 hours to get here," I said softly, my voice echoing in the vast, empty ballroom. "I didn't come here for the money, or the inheritance, or the suits. I came here because I thought maybe after 20 years, I finally had a home." Victoria let out a fresh wave of tears, her hand covering her mouth. "But you didn't see his son," I continued, my voice steady, devoid of anger. "You saw an embarrassment. You saw a threat to your perfect, golden life. If Christian hadn't been a monster, you would have happily let me sleep in the servants' quarters tonight. You would have let me wear this ridiculous suit and laughed along with the rest of them. Ethan, please." Arthur stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "We were wrong. We admit it. Give us a chance to make it up to you." "There is nothing to make up," I said, taking a step back toward the front doors. "I don't want your money, Arthur. I don't want your company, your shares, or your name. You can keep your empire. For what I've seen tonight, it's already hollowed out by termites." I turned my back on them and walked toward the grand double doors. "Ethan," Victoria cried out, her voice echoing desperately through the empty hall. "You can't just leave. Where will you go? You have nothing." I stopped at the threshold, the cool Long Island night air blowing against my face, carrying the scent of salt water and pine. "I have my life," I said, without turning around. "And for the first time, it's entirely mine." I pushed the doors open and walked out. The driveway was empty now, the luxury sports cars gone, leaving only the dark tire marks on the gravel. I walked down the long, winding driveway, the cheap polyester of my neon green suit rustling in the wind. When I reached the iron gates, I saw the maid's uniform Victoria had thrown at me earlier. It was still lying in the dirt near the bushes, crumpled and damp from the night dew. I paused, looked at it for a moment, and let out a quiet, soft laugh. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need it. I stepped through the iron gates, leaving the Vance estate behind me, and walked into the dark, quiet road, ready to find my own way home.